Most people who know the story of Jonah think they know what happened in the fish. He ran from God, ended up on a boat, got thrown overboard in a storm, swallowed by a large fish, spent 3 days inside it, prayed, got spat out on the shore, went to Nineveh. That's the version. That's the summary every Sunday school class ends with. But Jonah chapter 2 is not a summary, it's a prayer. A specific, detailed, forensic prayer from a man who is describing his experience in terms that go well beyond, "It was dark and smelly in there." And the very first thing Jonah says in that prayer should stop you completely. Jonah 2:2, "From the belly of Sheol I cried out." Not from the belly of the fish, from the belly of Sheol. Sheol, the Hebrew word for the realm of the dead, the place of departed souls, the underworld, the grave. Now either Jonah was using poetic language to describe how bad things felt, which is possible, or something more literal happened in those 3 days. And here's why that distinction matters enormously, because Jesus thought it mattered. In Matthew 12:40, Jesus said, "As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Jesus didn't say, as Jonah was uncomfortable and eventually rescued. He said, "As Jonah was in the belly of the great fish, so I will be in the heart of the earth." He used Jonah's 3 days as a direct parallel to his own death and resurrection, which means Jesus understood Jonah's experience as more than a timeout inside a large marine creature. He understood it as a preview of the death he was going to die. Let me take you through the prayer slowly, because this prayer is one of the most extraordinary pieces of writing in the entire Old Testament, and almost nobody reads it carefully. Jonah 2-3. "You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas. The current swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me." He was thrown overboard in a storm. We know that from chapter 1. The sailors cast lots, realized Jonah was responsible for the storm, and eventually threw him into the sea at Jonah's own request. The storm stopped the moment he hit the water, and then he sank. Verse 5. "The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head." Verse 6. "To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever." The roots of the mountains. In ancient Hebrew cosmology, the mountains were understood to have roots that went deep beneath the seafloor to the very foundations of the earth. Jonah is describing sinking to the deepest possible point, the absolute bottom of everything. And then the most important phrase in the whole prayer. "But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit." He didn't rescue himself. He couldn't. He was at the roots of the mountains, with seaweed wrapped around his head and the bars of the earth closing around him. God reached into the bottom of everything and brought him up. Now here's the question that sits at the center of this story and never gets asked in church. What was Jonah doing for 3 days? Chapter 2 verse 1 says, "Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from inside the fish." So we know he prayed. But when exactly? Before the fish or inside it? Read verse 2 again carefully. "I called out to the Lord in my distress, and he answered me. From the belly of Sheol I cried for help, and you heard my voice." Past tense. He said God had already answered. He was describing a prayer that had already been heard, and the fish was the answer. The fish was not the problem. The fish was the rescue, which completely reverses how most people picture this story. The fish didn't swallow Jonah as a punishment. The fish swallowed Jonah to save him from drowning. Jonah had already been at the roots of the mountains. He had already been in Sheol. The fish was the vehicle of his restoration, and Jonah prayed his thank you prayer from inside the rescue vehicle. Now I want to talk about something that this story does, that most people who quote it never engage with. Jonah ran from God. Deliberately, consciously. He knew exactly what God was asking, and he bought a ticket in the exact opposite direction. He knew the destination of that ship. He chose it. And when the storm came, Jonah was asleep in the cargo hold. He didn't go up and pray. He didn't confess to the sailors. He was sleeping. It was the pagan sailors who were praying, each one crying out to their own God. It was the pagan ship captain who woke Jonah up and said, "Get up and call on your God." The man of God was asleep in the storm he caused, and the pagans were the ones pleading with heaven. There is a whole sermon in that image that most preachers skip. And when Jonah did eventually confess, when the sailors asked him what was happening, and he told them the truth. "I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." And his solution was, "Throw me in. The storm will stop." Which is either bravery or exhaustion. I've never been entirely sure. Either way, he went in and sank, and the storm stopped, and the fish swallowed him. And here is the detail that moves me more than anything else in this story. The fish was already there. Jonah 1:17 says the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. The word provided in Hebrew is manna, which means appointed, designated, assigned. God assigned the fish before Jonah hit the water. The rescue was in place before the falling man arrived. 3 days in the dark, at the roots of the mountains, wrapped in seaweed, in the belly of Sheol, inside a fish. And at the end of 3 days, the fish vomited him out onto dry land. And God said, "Go to Nineveh." Same instruction, same assignment, same words, but a completely different man receiving them. You can't go through the belly of Sheol and come back unchanged. You can't be at the absolute bottom of everything rescued by something you didn't organize, delivered by a God you were running from, and emerge with the same relationship to your own self-sufficiency that you arrived with. The Jonah who walked into Nineveh was not the man who boarded the ship in chapter 1. He was the man who had been in the dark for 3 days and discovered that the darkness has a flaw, and the flaw has a God who knows where you are. And the God who knows where you are had already appointed the fish before you hit the water. The rescue was in place before the falling man arrived. It still is.